In this week's episode, I'm joined by David Smith, Associate Professor in the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and co author of Good Guys and Athena Rising. This week, our conversation is about Mexico's new president, Planet Fitness's trans inclusion, expansion of parental leave, and more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. Let's get started. David, welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you, Bernadette.
Thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell folks a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, as you said, I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins in the Carey Business School. I'm a sociologist by discipline and have done all of my research in the area of what we think of as the intersection of gender, work, and family. And so I had started my research looking at dual career families and looked at gender career paths and bias and performance evaluations. And really over the last 12 years or so with my co-author, Brad Johnson, have been working on a series of books and research around the idea of allyship that started around Athena Rising, our first book, which really focused on inclusive mentoring and sponsoring and advocacy. And then our second book, Good Guys, focused on a broader idea of allyship and thinking about it really kind of 3 key areas around interpersonal aspects of allyship, the public aspects of allyship, which really are about kind of advocacy as well as disruption when we see things happening or hear things happening. And then systemic allyship, which leads us into our third book that we're currently working on. And you and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit around the idea of systemic allyship, where we're really thinking about how do we create change that's lasting, that's long-term, that's really changing cultural practices and making long-standing change within our organizations, our society, and lots of different institutions. So looking at it at a much, much higher level.
Well, that's sort of why I wanted you on the show, because there's actually some great examples of sustainable allyship in this week's Good Vibes. So we'll get to those in just a few minutes. That's fantastic. I mean, what are some of the examples that you've seen or some of the things that are getting you excited about sustainable allyship?
That's a great question. And one of the things that's been really exciting is we've been doing the research for our latest book. And that is we talk to leaders and all sorts of different organizations, including, in government as well. There's a lot of great work going on out there. And I think that's one of the challenges we have around DEI is that sometimes a lot of the good work is just not as visible. We're not seeing it, we're not hearing about it as much, but there's a lot of great work going on out there. And I think that's one of the challenges we need to face is how do we highlight that? How do we make these best practice things that are working? And then, of course, sometimes things don't work exactly the way we want. And understanding how can we learn from that and then make sure that everybody gets a chance to share that. And to me, that's really how do we get to the basics of allyship is that sharing and learning and building community around how do we make things better for everybody. And lots of great examples out there. Just excited to start to share some of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And if we get back to sort of like the individual role in allyship, I mean, you're a professor. How have you figured out, and in your research and in your books, have you figured out any sort of tools of the trade to help grown-ups understand our common humanity? That we're all in it together. It's as simple as that. I think inclusion really is, and allyship really is as simple as that kind of fundamental belief. But how have you seen any ways to like really help folks get it?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of levels to that question. And one is, just thinking about it from the broader workplace perspective of understanding that, again, most of us work in teams of some kind. And it's just
Mhm.
inevitable, I think, in where we are today in work and understanding how to be most effective and efficient and be the most productive and delivering the best products, the highest quality. And in some cases, for organizations that are trying to create broader change, even, right? How do we do that faster? How do we do that better? So, from an innovation perspective, how do we become better at that? And certainly creating a workplace environment that is founded on the principles of allyship, right? Where we can learn how to have some humility about what we understand and what we
Mhm.
don't understand, and how we can help others become their best selves there, and everyone can thrive in the workplace, and not just focused on myself, but again, back to others. And I think this is where the leadership component of allyship is really crucial, and understanding that, hey, I have a role here to help create an environment where everybody can thrive, and understanding what that looks like, and it's not a one size fits all. And I think that's one of the challenges that too many leaders get caught up in the day to day, and it's really easy to do for all of us, I think, is remembering that, I also have a role when it comes to creating that environment. And how can I understand what works best for one person might work a little differently for somebody else. And then again, work is, as we've found, is not it's not a just a one size fits all. Everybody has certain requirements, and those change over time as well. And so being able to be, how can I flex to that to make it work for everyone?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, just remembering that everyone was an individual with their individual needs and styles. Absolutely. Well, in this week's Five Things newsletter, which, by the way, celebrating 5 years of Five Things, which is pretty exciting. In this week's Five Things newsletter, I wrote about my previous career as a wedding planner specializing in LGBTQ weddings. And I started this business back when marriage equality came to Massachusetts, which was the first state in the country to have marriage equality. And back then, it was 2004, only about a third of Americans supported marriage equality. And when I ended that business about 14 years later, it was over 70%. And so one of the things that I wrote about was how the rite of passage of a wedding became a vehicle. It became a Trojan horse for societal acceptance, right? People came to the wedding sometimes out of a sense of obligation, not really supporting marriage equality, even though they love the people, and then leaving as true allies. And so I think that there's really something to be said about sort of a covert approach and a more subtle approach so that people don't always feel like they're being taught, right? Right? It becomes something that is, a Trojan horse.
Yeah, absolutely. I think putting everything, and this, I think this goes back to your original question around, things that are working around DEI, things that keep me optimistic about this today. What I'm hearing from people is that it's the practical application piece, right? It's not,
Mhm,
education needs to happen, but how we do that matters too. And I think being able to apply that in everyday settings that are important to people, that are, that have values tied to them. It's values based. And certainly things like marriage and family have those values based ideals that, again, if we can include that as part of it and make it practical, and see how that works for one person, works maybe a little different for somebody else. And it may not align exactly the way maybe you were raised or you were socialized, but this is how it
mhm.
works for lots of people. And it doesn't have to be, again, a one size fits all, but finding the practical application, I think, is a great way to go about thinking about this.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's move into some practical applications in this
Mm.
week's Good Vibes. The first story this week comes from Scholastic Books, which published a Pride Guide offering educators a curated list of LGBTQ plus books for children. And there's more in there, resources about book bans, and so Scholastic last year received had a backlash because they allowed schools to opt out of offering diverse books at book fairs. They had a huge backlash to that. Then they rescinded, and now they're releasing the Pride Guide. And so I will take it, even though it's reactive rather than proactive. I will still take the win.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there's room for people to again to learn from and whether you consider it to be a mistake or not. I think that people learn from that, and then there was an
Mhm.
opportunity there for Scholastic books to learn from that and to move forward, right, into a better solution as it comes to that. The banned books is the whole thinking around that I find to be really challenging in a lot of different ways, whether it's about LGBTQ plus or it's around other aspects that, again, in related to DEI or other areas that I find that really challenging because I think again ideas come from lots of different places and we're placing some sort of a value on ideas in one way or another and saying that some should not be accessible or we shouldn't even read them or listen to them. I think is it's heresy in some way. It
Mm.
harkens back to older, centuries ago, where we we look
Right.
back at some of those people that they had these crazy ideas, and it's like, what if we and they were tried to ban them at the time, and what if those people hadn't found a way to get their ideas expressed in different ways, and books are just one of them. And certainly, as we move forward in time, that there are lots of different ways to get ideas expressed and to understand how others may see the world differently or perceive things differently and to value that and again it doesn't have to mean it works for you, but again understanding how people are experiencing the world a little bit differently and perceive things differently, I think makes us all a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree, and see some of the books that my 13-year-old is being, taught in school and how they're opened his eyes. I mean, he read a book
Mm.
recently called Refugee, and which was 4 different stories of refugees, or 3, and, it really gave him some empathy. Like, and it's just that stuff really matters. So I agree that we need to do everything we can to make sure folks still have this access.
Yeah, to me as an educator, it'd be like telling me I can't use certain books in my curriculum.
Yeah.
And I just find that it's like you don't necessarily have to agree with a theory or agree with a way that things are done in a particular way, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be aware of them and we shouldn't begin to understand and begin to develop. How do we develop empathy in people, especially as you think about children? Here's a great opportunity to do this at a younger age and to develop that empathy so that when they become working adults, they've already got those kind of skills.
Yeah, I agree. All right, the second story this week comes from Mexico, which has elected its first female president, Claudia Sheinbaum, a physicist and former mayor of Mexico City. This is notable for a couple of reasons. First of all, in 2019, Mexico had a constitutional reform mandating gender parity in political candidates, and that has dramatically increased female representation. So, policy led to parity, and then, she's also the first person of Jewish descent to lead the predominantly Catholic nation. So, really, really cool what's going on in Mexico with Claudia Scheinbaum.
Yeah, and who'd have thought that, it'd be Mexico was gonna have a female president before the United States or a lot of other countries out there. And again, I think it just to me it also emphasizes the fact that there's a lot of great work going on at different levels, right? And sometimes at the
Mhm.
government level, sometimes at organizational levels or grassroots levels that we don't understand, we haven't seen, we're just not aware of it in some
Mhm.
cases. And here's one where I mean some significant change coming along in Mexico. We'll see how it plays out in terms of other areas and the impact that again she's able to lead from that role. And I also from again the religious aspect of that, just in some ways, I'm not sure which is more significant. They're
Uh-huh.
both incredibly significant to have somebody of the Jewish faith, leading in a country like Mexico. I was like,
Mhm.
wow, that's just mind blowing in so many different ways, and exciting to see that their population saw the opportunity there, saw the value add when it came to her leadership skills and background and experience, and the fact that she comes from a STEM background as well. I think is very
Yeah.
exciting. So yeah, lots of great things going on there.
It's a fabulous story. And just so you know, that constitutional reform in 2019, that has currently led to 50% of the seats in Mexico's lower house of Congress being occupied by women, and women leading a third of Mexico's states. So it is like win after win. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So we'll keep an eye on what else follows all of this women in leadership. Okay, the third story this week comes from Planet Fitness, which recently stood by its trans inclusive locker room policy, revoking the membership of a member who posted a video misgendering a trans woman and violating the gym's no photo rule. So that revocation sparked lots of backlash, but Planet Fitness emphasized their commitment, stating discomfort isn't grounds for denying access. So they have this whole judgment free zone ethos. And I just really love seeing companies affirm trans inclusion when there's so much backlash right now.
Yeah, and to me, this gets back to the comments, the things we were talking about earlier, related to empathy and understanding and awareness of how others may experience things differently. And so many people today, I still find, have just don't know anybody personally who is trans. And again, until you've had a chance to talk to somebody and let them share their story with you and their experiences with you, it's just eye-opening to see how differently they've experienced things and to really kind of see their perspective on that and why these policies are really important, especially in the everyday places and things like gyms, for example, because it really is affirming in terms of who they are and that they are included. They do belong there.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. It's brave. It's
Mhm.
brave because the backlash is so real right now, and we have seen other companies back down. So, Planet Fitness and their $10 a month membership or whatever it is, like, go get it. Go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. The last stories this week are right up your alley, David. This is about FIFA and the Citigroup expanding parental leave, or catching up, depending on who you ask, in
Mhm.
promoting gender equality and parental leave support. So, FIFA's new protocols, so FIFA is the soccer association, the Global Soccer Association, their new protocols offer 14 weeks of paid maternity leave for players and coaches, and 8 weeks for adoptive and non biological mothers. So that it was initially just for players, and then it's expanded to coaches, and then Citigroup has expanded their leave as well, and it's just great to see people getting more opportunities to spend time with their kids, and we want to see more dads actually taking advantage of this expanded parental leave.
Yeah, and it is exciting. And it is part of the trend, although there's still a minority of companies today that offer things like 16 weeks of leave. And as you said, I think one of the opportunities here is to provide a policy in this case that allows
Mhm.
all parents, mothers, fathers, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're adopting or you're the birth parent, right? That
Right.
everyone gets the opportunity to be a parent and be part of that experience. The challenge with that is I can offer 16 weeks, but it doesn't mean that people are going to take it. And I think that,
Right.
again, we find more often that women are taking that. Again, the traditional notions of caregiving still tend to fall to women. However, how do we incentivize or how do we change things to make it so that it's normalized and destigmatized in many ways for men and for fathers to
Right.
be a part of that as well as parents and understand that they have an important role there. There's a lot of, again, this is back to the education. How do we educate both leaders and companies to create policy and to create practices that allow people to take that. So managers are encouraging, or we set that as the norm. The expectation is that you would take it. Why wouldn't you take it? Right? There's something that we're offering. It's something that's good for you. It's good for your family and your children. And oh, by the way, it's good for organizations too, because it builds commitment. It builds better employees. We're going to retain employees longer in our companies. Are going to go further. The research is just, so overwhelmingly positive in terms of doing it. And even for those naysayers out there, for the leaders who are like, yeah, but it's going to cost us all this money. And it's like, yeah, but the long-term benefits actually show us that, that's actually Worst case, it's neutral. And best case, you're making money on the deal. So again, lots of great things to see. And especially, Citigroup in a sector like finance, where again, tends to lag a little behind some of the other sectors that are out there, other industries. Great to see them taking a lead here and really pushing on this. And FIFA too, again, back into sports. FIFA has, again, had its bumpy roads along the way. And certainly there's more work to be done there, but a great step forward and expanding this beyond just players, but also to, again, the rest of their coaches and staff out there. So great progress, keeps me excited and we need to be doing more.
I completely agree. Well, David, how can folks get in touch with you?
Great question. Yeah. So you can find us, if you visit our website, which is Workplace Allies, all one word, workplaceallies.com is a great place. You can see the latest of what we're doing and see what we're writing about, where we're speaking, the different events that we're doing. So lots of great information there. And certainly find us on social media. Look us up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Well, we'll make sure that folks get in touch with you. And I'm going to put a link to all of that. That'll all be in the show notes. This week's call to action is a new organization that I just learned about called Grace. It's a transgender-led national nonprofit that's creating videos featuring conservative and center-right parents standing up for their trans children. So I'm going to share a video in the show notes and in the LinkedIn comments, and it's about Eric Childs, an Operation Iraqi Freedom combat veteran who talks about his trans teenager. And he has conservative values, and I think it's just really amazing to kind of model that it's just love, it's just love. So, all right, David. Well, great to have you on the show. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. And if you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.